I am going to shut off this fan. I'll be back in 30 seconds.
Cool.
It's making like a whooshing sound, and I don't want that to come through. Okay.
And see if they and get his family documents or puts on hand. I was so.
So this is going through YouTube.
I'm steadily saying it is while muted.
That's what happens.
All right, it is 2 o'clock here. I am going to give folks a couple of minutes to get in here. So we'll start at 2:05 if that's okay with you, Franklin.
I missed the question. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was saying it's 2 o'clock, but we can get started at 2:05 just to give folks a couple minutes to get in.
I love it. So who else here so far? Who? Now, is everyone here people that, do you guys all meet on Saturday, guys and gals?
Saturdays for the security plus or the capture the flags or any of those things?
Yeah.
I think half of these people's names I recognize just from being within the Black Girls Hack Squad.
Okay.
the other ones, like, some people just have aliases, so it's quite possible that they're all from.
All right. And so what's your next CTF?
So I think next Saturday we're going to do the BCA Capture the Flag, which is Hack the Box, I think. So we're excited about that. We've already declared that we're going to win it.
Okay. Yeah,
Hey,
I like the
Booby.
confidence.
Later on today, let's customize your Zoom.
Oh, is that
like,
Tasha?
put the background up on it.
Is that Tasha? I don't know what just happened.
Somebody muted and unmuted and muted, maybe. So if I look at this on YouTube, what will I see?
It's a 5-minute delay.
Yeah, that's cool. I can see us in both places.
Did anyone come in from Meetup? Did anyone who's here already come in from Meetup?
Yes, this is Alma. I did.
Okay.
How you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Hi, Alma.
I also came in from Meetup. I'm Brooklyn.
Okay.
And I did as well, Lynette.
I did as well.
Yeah.
My name is.
Matthew, you have a question? No? Okay. All right. So I guess we can go ahead and get started. There's still people who are saying that they're having some issues getting into the room, but I see that there's almost 20 people in here now, so something is working somewhere. So I am just going to introduce you guys to Franklin Diaz. Any bio that I do is not going to give him justice, but he is a cloud and networking security person from, I believe you work for Palo Alto.
That's right.
And you can fill in the details from there.
Okay. Yeah, so where to start? Yeah, I heard the word cloud a couple times, and I like it, right? Like, I think that's for sure where security is heading. And so we'll probably talk about that quite a bit, but there's a couple of other things that I think being a security focused person in a world that's headed to the cloud are worth mentioning. So I'm going to try this. I don't know if it's going to work, but real quick, just so you can see what I look like. That's a joke. Here's a slide that says some things. So I do work at Palo Alto Networks. You may be familiar. We make something called the Next Gen Firewall, right? So this is a firewall that doesn't just look at ports and, layer 3 and 4. It's more like X-rays the packets. Pretty cool stuff. So there I work on a team called Professional Services, and we're kind of like guns for hire. So they'll send us out to do stuff for the customer, right? Rented hands to solve complex technical security problems in cloud environments. Okay, so I want to back up for 1 second. It's okay to interrupt me at any time. So if there's something you want to know more about, or like a path you want to take, I'm happy to do it. Yeah. So far so good, hopefully. So what we focus on specifically in the cloud is automating things. Okay, so what does that mean? If it's easy to do stuff, right? Everybody has ideas, they can make tools. One of the first things you do as you start to get into tech, right, is find ways to make it easier to do your own work, right? Whether it's a Python script or a tool to manage your CTF challenges. But the complexity comes in with scale. So what do I mean by that? Doing things on 1, 2, 3 computers is pretty manageable typically. But what happens when you get to hundreds or thousands of computers, or you have millions or billions of log events per day that you have to handle, right? So that's what I mean by scale. Things are more challenging to handle when it's at a larger scale. So we try to put repeatable steps, process, security around things like infrastructure as code, security as code, policy as code, things called like SAST, DAST. So security test suites. So instead of just, hey, I built this app and there's some test cases that go with it, we would also add a set of security test cases that go with it. So far, so good. Okay, so I guess, oh, I'm sorry. The other thing I was going to ask, are there people in the tech field now that are a lot of us working on getting jobs in tech? Is that what we should focus a little more on?
I guess if we can speak open, I'm a cybersecurity analyst, so this is my first tech job right out of college.
Nice. Okay, so early career, right? We all have that arc that we're on, and I'm a little farther to the right on that arc, but it sounds like maybe you're a little further on the left, right? So earlier in time. We all do it, right? That's the order of things. What I hear a lot is folks that are wanting to get into a tech job or do something a little more technical or follow their interests, right? So hopefully we can tailor this to that, and it's not too like abstract or egg-headed, shall we say. Okay, so I hope that describes a little bit about what I do. I'll tell you one more about what I did, the job before this one, because I think it's pretty interesting. So hopefully you're all familiar with the term blue team, right? So you've got the attackers and the defenders typically. So in information security, it's all about enforcing corporate policy, right? So the people that run the show, the C-levels, want us, you, me and you, to somehow make a team, figure out the tech. They don't want to hear the details. They want it done, right? Secure the network. We don't want people using our network in this manner. Whether it's a message boards, you know, I know someone who just started at Reddit. I was talking to them and I was thinking like, they don't want folks using their message boards in a certain way, right? So you go out and try to enforce that policy. Sometimes you put on your bad guy hat, or not even bad guy, but put on your hat of, hey, how can people circumvent those rules, those policies that we want to enforce? And then you tell that stuff, that's the red team, then you tell that stuff to the blue team, and the blue team has to codify, implement that stuff, keep those people out, keep people from violating the way you want things to go. So all that is making sure that folks don't use the network in a way you don't want. Hacking is, in my opinion, the opposite of that. So folks that want to use the network or your company resources that you have that are in your administrative domain in a way that you don't want, right? So a hacker could be someone who inadvertently did a thing to post a message to 1,000 of your boards advertising, right? So they're trying to game the system, make money, do a thing in a way that you don't want. Is it hacking? Maybe, I don't know. Trying to make money doing something against the rules, maybe against the law. Okay. Okay, so I said all that to say I was on the blue team at Salesforce. And I think the blue team is a little more, I don't want to offend anybody, but I think you have to think a little harder, right, as blue team, because you can't make a mistake. And those bad guys, and even the red team, who's kind of out to show you up sometimes or find flaws through no fault of their own, that's how they get paid. That's how they get recognized, right? Oh, look, I found this vulnerability. So you have to not slip, not let those things happen even once, because that's bad. That's your whole thing. Your whole thing is stopping breaches, stopping bad guys, stopping the red team. Hey, we found the red team in 20 minutes this time, right? We didn't know they were coming, but our process, our people, our teams are so good, we stopped that quick, right? So, so that cloud piece, I think, is relevant here, because this security industry, right, has been a formal thing, has been a thing for maybe 15 years, let's say 20. The past 10, 15 years have really seen this piece of the technology industry become super relevant. Right? Everybody's out to eat your lunch, steal your stuff, grab your data, whatever, right? You hear this all the time, like data is the new oil, like it's so vital. So that history of folks being blue team, being red team, isn't that long in the big scheme of things. And you've got these groups pretty, I guess I'll use the word proud, like they've done some tough, interesting work. And now you've got folks coming along saying, okay, there's AI and we can automate and we can scale the way I described, right? So what if we could take containers and use all this stuff, all these terms that I mentioned, this cloudy-ish stuff, to catch bad guys quicker or find anomalies or, right? So how are we going to use this technology to thwart the people who want to use our corporate resources in a way that we don't want? And it's just a fascinating time, and there's so much to do there. And anybody who tells you they're not hiring, like, that's crazy talk, because anyway, it's fascinating. Okay, questions so far? I know I've said a lot.
So I have a question. You mentioned that part of what you're doing, I guess, is the cloud in cloud security is infrastructure as a service, which is just basically, automating the process of deploying a lot of VMs to be able to, be able to use those. So how much would you say that you, are actually just deploying the infrastructure versus actually protecting the infrastructure? And can you talk about, like, some of the things that you would do to try to, make sure that those VMs or those resources that you're deploying, that they're secure versus just making sure that they're properly configured, for example?
Oh, and that's a fine line too, the difference between proper configuration and security, because take it way back to the beginning, right? What you find in security a lot of times is the simplest things are the foundation of big mistakes later. So knowing what's on your network, like just by enumerating devices, figuring out what's out there, making sure that you don't push a tiny mistake to a lot of machines that becomes a big problem later. Anyway, let me answer your question. Infrastructure as a service that you mentioned, when we say infra as a service, I think of like Heroku, maybe. I think of a service where all you worry about is the app. Infrastructure as code now is we write Terraform and we go to these people and we say, we've got containerized security devices, could be a VM, but typically it's more like an image, more like a software image that spins up in an instance, right? And we put these things on your network and traffic flows through it, and we can see what's happening on your network. And the big push now is DNS security, of course, SSL. So should you so decide, and a lot of companies do, beware. So real quick, like an organization has sort of, imagine like a parent certificate for all the traffic on their network that gets encrypted as it flows across the corporate network. Having those certificates, having the private piece of that two-part key system is like the keys to the kingdom, because now that we have all that traffic, we can do all sorts of analysis on it, right? So that's a big piece from any network security company that they sell these days. So in addition to, I think I'm answering your question, in addition to creating infrastructure as code, security as code, and policy as code. So policy as code is like, I'm giving you this infrastructure as code with these guardrails around it. Right? Hand you all that stuff that you paid us to make for you. There are also ways, and maybe this again is thinking a little more like a red teamer, but there are ways to evaluate, audit, enumerate, what does that network look like? What's going on out there? How does the traffic flow? Where are the bottlenecks? Important questions like, how do you see traffic increasing in the coming months? Because we just sold you a thing and it's got this many pipes and this many, buckets to hold the stuff as the I'm not going to say sewage, but as the data flows through it, right? What's that going to look like in 6 months? What's your 5-year plan? So there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of questions around, does it scale? Is it future-proof? How future-proof is it? I think all these things feed into the security piece, and I think security has to be part of every step in that process. So we use iterative software development processes over time. So you get this kind of, we're always feeding back into our own development pipeline, security pipeline, data pipeline. The pipelines are the things that take ideas and software from inception to, I guess you'd say conception, to implementation to the real world, right? Have you heard of shift left? That's a really good one to know. There's this idea of pushing security sooner in the development cycle. Take some time, look at shift left, look at zero trust. Zero trust models are the big thing right now, I think, for enterprise level network defense. I feel like this stuff is interesting, but we could also take this back and talk about more tactical, tangible, like what are the steps you could take to get into security? We could, I don't know, what else you want to talk about?
Anyone, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the box or unmute yourself. I was just going to say, for someone who is just, entering into the field and they think, hey, I want to do cloud security. I want to, do professional services or automation. What certifications would you suggest? What is your educational background? Like, how did you get to where you're at now? Could you talk a little bit about your trajectory to how you got to what you're doing now, and if there was anything concrete that you said, hey, I definitely needed this certification or this education or this experience, and that helped you to get to where you're at. I think that information would be useful.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, the education and kind of the cousin of that, certification. So I've been doing this for a while, and when I started out, I think I alluded to this idea that there wasn't information security in college early on. Interestingly, I didn't even go to college, right? I started in tech, and they were like, listen, if you want to keep working here, you got to go get a degree, whatever. But okay, fine. So I had to go, I went nights and weekends, and wound up doing okay, got a couple of degrees out of it. But there was also a certification piece, and I see a lot right now where, and I think I'm in a position to comment on this because I've got a foot in both worlds, right? I've done the college and I've done the certs. But I see a lot of folks talking about, is college worth it? Haha, I got my job without going to college. This cert was awesome. Some other person said, same cert, this cert sucks, right? So it's timely, it's relevant. In my opinion, the college, university, master's degree piece, I think anything you can do to distinguish yourself is good, to get your foot in the door somewhere. What do I mean by that? If you go for a job cold, like I want to go work at Apple, all they're going to have in front of them is my resume. Okay, fine. So they're going to look and say, okay, well, this person's got this, and that. Okay, college. Some of the more engineering heavy, and by that I mean like electrical, mechanical, not so much software, but engineering heavy companies that actually develop products, won't even talk to you unless you've got double E, computer engineering, stuff like that. Even for kind of the security pieces. At Motorola, there was a time when they laid off anyone who didn't have a 4-year. Okay. All that said, I don't know that it's like that anymore. I think you can do really well without the degree. It's good to distinguish yourself, but you can do just fine by getting some certs. The certs that served me well were network certs. The cert I liked the most myself was like the CCNA. So I did the Cisco network. I think I did associate and professional. Cisco also had security certs. I think I got first one, maybe Cisco security associate. That stuff, yeah, there was some vendor tie-in. But the genius thing, and I've been trying to tell my current employer this, the genius thing was Cisco had this whole secondary market on eBay around their used gear. And everybody was like, at this, it's like NVIDIA video cards now, right? Everyone wants to get the video cards and do the AI stuff. Now that's the hot thing. But 10 years ago, everyone wanted a CCIE rack or lab in their basement or whatever it was, right? You could rent time, you could do all these things. But this whole ecosystem that sprung up around folks building these labs and trying to get those certs, excuse me, it's genius, right? It was like great for their company. But what I liked about it was I got to focus hard on certain network routing protocols, switching protocols. I think knowing how to
Hey, Franklin. I'm sorry. I was trying to mute someone who was making noise and I accidentally muted you because you popped back up in the list. Could you unmute yourself? I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
So the Cisco cert's good for me. I think learning basic networking, good. Sec Plus, I like it. A lot of people working on it. The thing I like about it is it's going to get you talking with other folks. And that's huge. Building a community, building a network of contacts, that stuff's invaluable. And that's how you're going to find jobs, right? So even though I think a lot of this information, I could change it so quick, books almost as soon as they're printed, not that useful. The people you meet, the connections you make, the connections on Twitter, on social media, right? That stuff is going to pay off in the long term.
I think Joe had a question.
Yes, thank you. I did have a question. With the rise in the popularity of cloud computing, do you see a specialized security certification that pulls away from, say, standard certs?
Which cloud ones do I like? I like stuff with Kubernetes, right? So CKA. I think that specific example, even though it's not security focused, let me back up a step. The cloudy piece is containers and Kubernetes. So containers created locally in Docker or Podman, right, whatever it is, that can go through the CI pipeline, that phase of software delivery, and get deployed or even cloned so many times that it scales well in a Kubernetes cluster, those are the dollars, right? In my opinion, as a security focused principal, architect, whatever it is in cloud, you've got to know all that stuff, right? And then be able to secure it. Because if you don't know what it is, if you can't enumerate it, if you can't explain it simply, you can't secure it. I don't know. Did I answer your question? I think the Kubernetes certs, the stuff from, it's not Linux Academy, it's starts with a C. I'll look it up here real quick.
Yes, you did ask my answer part of my question. I think what I was really looking for is, do we see, yes, we think security is security, right? Regardless of where we're at, but because the cloud has kind of risen to the top, do we see like maybe specialized certs or fields pulling away from the standardized track of security of yesteryear? Does that make sense?
So I think what you're asking is security becoming its own thing, kind of? And
Well, is there cloud security kind of having its own lane, right?
I hope not. And I'll tell you why. I hope what happens is I don't just want a security person on the development team. I want everyone thinking with a security mindset, baked in security from the outset. So when a new feature is introduced, right, from cradle to the grave, these things become more secure if you've got security higher on your list of tenets, right, important pieces to consider.
Thank you.
Yeah. But if you're asking me like specific certs, I'm not sure. I'll say this, there's a proliferation. There are so many that it's difficult to keep up. Same thing with tools. It's so hard to know. So as different languages spring up, different, like just around Kubernetes or Docker, right? There's these whole ecosystems that spring up and tools all around it. And it's hard to keep track. It's an explosion of growth, I think, in that regard.
So does your company hire, I guess, more junior people, and like what certifications or what is it that you guys are looking for if you do?
Yes, I know that we bring on interns every year, and I know that we have a ton of stuff posted on the web at all levels, right? So that's from entry all the way to mid-career to farther on in the career. Specifically Palo Alto, so it's networking, firewalls, how do I do packet capture, how do I maybe a little more network centric stuff, but again, you got to have that security piece too. So yeah, I think Sec Plus is a great jumping off point. I think it's important to, there are a lot of silos in security, right? The particular silo where I work happens to be networking related products, and it's expanding into software lifecycle. For the reason I mentioned, these containers getting developed locally and kind of flowing into the cloud, that's, I think, the big battleground for securing the apps that are out there running on, when I say the cloud, public cloud, I mean Amazon, typically, AWS, Amazon, Azure from Microsoft, GCP, Google Cloud. There are some others that we do sometimes, not as often in the domestic markets, but Alibaba, there's Oracle, right? There are a bunch of DigitalOcean I use too. I'll say there are a lot of providers out there. So
Cool. Any other questions for Joe? Or, I'm sorry, for Franklin?
So Cloud Native Computing Foundation. I'm going to paste that one. Feel like they had a bunch of training. So here's the one I mentioned. I'll just paste this in the chat, the CKA. I want to talk real quick about home labs. This comes up a ton because folks need ways to learn, places to learn. You need a spot where you can experiment without getting in trouble, especially when it comes to security. A word of warning, right? If you go to AWS and spin up your Kali Linux and start scanning stuff and do it right, like you're going to get a phone call, and or worse, depending on how far you take that, right? So at any time, right, hit me up, Twitter, wherever. I'm happy to talk through how to set up a lab, how to spin up an instance in EC2 with a container or not containerized that will let you test, let you do some scans, let you see what it looks like when you find some stuff and want to analyze it. So I think there's a something to be said for collecting logs and analyzing those logs. So that's a big piece of blue team work. For example, packet captures, right? At Salesforce, we spent a lot of time capturing packets and looking at what was in those. Sometimes you're able to SSL decrypt. So there's network traffic, there's device logs. So what are these machines saying? They're putting out messages. They're telling you, hey, something's wrong. My disk is full. My, whatever it is needs more resources. There's that piece of it. But there's also information to be gained from starting to look at this data and asking questions about what it means with respect to security. When do people log in? Why did this guy log in? Why did this girl log in 10 times from California? And then this guy logged in with her credentials from Russia when she's supposedly asleep, right? That's the kind of stuff you want to start to think about, to abstract, to glean from these logs.
So Ed wants to know what your social media profile is, and then also, are you on LinkedIn?
Haha, I'm going to answer this question a little bit differently than you might expect. In my opinion, everyone who can hear my voice, right, should go to GitHub and create an account. GitHub has a bit of a social aspect, but mostly it's about projects. So I will share, it's loading up over here on my screen. I will share a link to my GitHub before I share a link to my LinkedIn, because what I challenge you to do is the next time you test something out, write a script, you want to learn Python, you want to, like, these foundational pieces, if you can collaborate, if you can start to create repos in GitHub. So the whole point of it is to, it's your data at rest, but other people can see it, comment on it. You can start to trade this stuff, think it through. There's a ton of security code, resources, all this stuff. Okay, you get the point. So I'll also put my LinkedIn in the chat. I don't know, is this stuff helpful? Do I sound like a crazy crackpot? Like,
Oh, not at all. Yes, Shauna, you got a question?
Yeah, so I love that you touched on, just kind of like being in a place where you're like sharing your information and knowledge.
okay.
But with that, like I have a GitHub, like I've done projects with like Terraform and Cloud,
Nice.
but then what are ways that like you can share that data, I guess, in spaces where it's more visible to more people, aside from just having it on your resume? Like I know like now you mentioned, okay, like contributing to other people's repos, making comments. Are there any like security kind of like open source projects that you recommend contributing to, or working groups, or other ways to kind of like be visible in the community?
Whew, boy, I have to pick one. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a DIY spirit behind all this, and I think the open source movement embodies that. And I think that it is an absolute shame if you do nothing more than take from these open source projects without giving back. So I 100% hear you, and I love the way you're thinking, because in my opinion, that's the way to be. That's where it's at. As far as picking one, that's tough. Like it would take me a little more time to think of one. Like there's some seriously noble causes out there. So I think anything, you can go out there, you can make money, you can do work and be satisfied and improve your life. But there's also this dimension of meaningful work, and how does your work impact society? How does your work impact the world? Let me give an example. Without naming names, of a certain three-letter governmental agency called ICE, right? If you were to find out that code that you created, even if it was open sourced, was being used by a three-letter agency whose policies perhaps you didn't agree with, how would you feel? Incensed, maybe, right? So you have a responsibility to give back, and you have a responsibility to say something when people try to leverage your work for forces other than good, we'll just say. So I know I said a lot, maybe I'm a little off topic, but I do feel strongly that your work should have meaning, as well as just the purpose of supporting your family, right? So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, you did.
Bit of a soapbox. But
So we've got another question. What are your thoughts on blue, red, or purple roles in the cloud? Does it work the same way? If not, what are the nuances between that and a regular TCP/IP ecosystem?
That's a big one. The thing that comes to top of mind is we're at a time where a lot of companies are either one foot in both worlds, right? So this traditional brick and mortar, big iron infra. And then the other side of that is this concept of the cloud. And a lot of companies are switching, in the process of switching, thinking about switching. For us, the end users, the consumers, right, all this stuff should be transparent. But I think in practice, it's not. I think the reason is a lot of companies see the migration to the cloud as an opportunity to refactor, as an opportunity to, hey, that stuff we've been meaning to fix, but we couldn't do it because of these constraints, whatever, there's a fresh start, because everything's moving to these centrally managed, now that we don't have to make our own electricity, now that it comes from the power company, let's go focus on this stuff over here. And that, at the same time as the migration, makes things tough. The security issues with the cloud, I think a lot of it is the novelty of it, misconfigurations because of the newness, perhaps. So a lot of folks are still learning how their job's going to look in the cloud. I used to work on big iron, but I still work here, so I have to go learn all this stuff and how to secure it, right? So for example, a couple of years ago, there was a lot around S3 buckets, right? So people, 5, 6, whatever, 10 different people I knew dropped these scanners that would just go out and look for misconfigurations, right? Because remember, the security is built on this foundation of the simple, right? You've got to do the basics. So it was easy to get that low-hanging fruit. And before you know it, we've got breaches because of what was in those storage buckets. So IAM policies, rules about who can do what, access, right? That AAA thing that you're probably learning about in your cert. Access, authorization, and whatever the other A is, who can remember. But your question says, what are your thoughts on blue, red, or purple team roles in the cloud? Okay, so I think I'm a blue teamer, but because I have to figure out stuff that's going to keep companies secure, I also have to test my own stuff. Like I have to take that sort of red team mindset, right? So I have to go out and build the scanners and like have a container that with my secret sauce in it that goes out and pulls all this stuff in and does all this. Like, get a picture, get that snapshot, enumerate, know what's out there, right? Does that make me a red teamer? Not really a hacker unless I break the rules. So I think it's a red teamer because I'm trying to make sure that the corporate policies of the company that I'm in and the company that we want to sell stuff to are adhered to. Okay, so that I guess makes me purple because my job title says blue team. I don't know. It's tough, right? We'll call it purple. Does it work the same way? Does it work the same way? No, for the reason I mentioned, but also yes. So again, it's right, that idea of go for the low-hanging fruit. Don't try to get fancy, right? If I want to hack the company or stop someone from hacking the company, I'm not going to like go nuts. I'm just going to take this simple idea. I go to most commonly used passwords.com and I look for the device. I know that because I just did a scan, right? I did Nmap. Your company uses, I'm not going to pick on, your company uses XYZ networking gear. Okay, so I look in the list and I didn't even look in the list. I wrote a Python tool that looked in the list, pulled the most common passwords. Then I ran it against all your routers because I did a trace route from here to there and I saw what was in the path, right? And now I just brute force, right? My script runs all night and I woke up and I'm brushing my teeth and I hear the ding and boop, oh, hey, I got creds on router number 3 in San Francisco, right? Like it's not, that stuff hasn't changed, I guess, between the cloud and Big Iron, but the cloud has some unique and interesting challenges. I don't know, am I even answering the question? Nuances between regular and cloud TCP/IP ecosystem. Nuances. The routing is different. So the cloud has this concept. The public cloud has this concept because it's multi-tenancy. So what do I mean by that? All these people, all these companies are sharing all these computers, but they get these administrative slices, right? VPCs, virtual private clouds, they're called in Amazon, or whatever they're called in the other providers. So maintaining that boundary is something that you don't have to do in the traditional, maybe in certain data centers, but if your company was large enough that ran its own data center, this was not a concern before. There's also the idea of security groups, right? So grouping these virtualized resources together in ways that protect them, that prevent access between them. In certain cases you want it, certain cases you don't, and that's tough. That's not easy. Boy, there's companies out there that use Azure and Google, or they have 5 different providers, right? And here's the reason, and this is legacy and whatever, and you're like, okay, now we've got to route between these, figure out how security rules work, how do we pass data between all this stuff, and how do you route between that stuff? Like it can be challenging, and it can be unique to cloud. All right, I'll stop talking. That was a lot.
All right, so do we have any other questions for Franklin? Ed wants to know, you answered this already, but you mentioned a secondary market for Cisco devices to build a home lab. Does that include cloud products as well?
The interesting thing about the secondary market for hardware is you still have to license the firmware images. You needed a source back in the day when we were building those to get the images to flash on the devices, to bring them up to date, to use with whatever hardware modules you purchased off eBay and so on. Now that we're in the cloud, right? Even if you want to spin up a containerized firewall, like what my company sells, you would have to pay the licensing, pay the fees. It's an interesting change. Like, you used to go to GameStop and buy the disc, but now you just go on the PlayStation and subscribe, and they unlock the game for you, and then you stop paying for PlayStation Plus, the game's locked, right? Like, the control model is different from these companies. That said, if you want to build a lab, what I would look at is like GNS3. There are ways to do this that are open source. There are ways to do this that are a little more difficult, but you can do it. And I think, you know, if you want to get into security, basic sysadmin skills, learning networking basics, security plus, right? So learning these rules around learning about firewalls. So I think I answered that. If you want to build in the cloud, use Terraform, learn to use Ansible. Other technologies I think that are good and accessible, like Python. Go goes a little bit harder, but I think it's like the next big one. Feels like, maybe I could be wrong. So Terraform is like infra as code. Ansible will let you provision these machines, whether they're in the cloud or still on big iron. Virtualization technologies, VMware, Oracle's OpenBox on your desktop, right? Those are all good things to learn. Hopefully that answers it. So I want to talk real quick about I see there's another question, but for like 2 seconds, get out there, go to B-sides, get into these community events, go to security conferences. Don't spend the whole time drinking. You're gonna there's no point. Like, meet people, learn to do stuff, trade ideas, and information security conferences, I think, are a great place to do that. So, and books in the background. Here's what I'm reading. I don't know if you can see this one. I can't see my own screen, but this is super good.
You can see it.
Devops Handbook. Really enjoying this one. Real quick. Oh, I know. This, I don't know if this one's relevant. So this one is about an African-American gentleman from the Bronx. And I'm going to slaughter his name. It says Bijovi Neware. I'm not sure the name, but he worked on OpenBSD. This book's probably 10 or 15 years old. He was a big contributor to open source. He talks in here about how he got started. I think he talks about his travels to Japan. I haven't kept up with like his career or anything, but it's called Hacker Cracker. It's a pretty good one, but it's specifically sort of that. I guess maybe the Black perspective on tech. It's pretty interesting. So I don't know.
All right, folks, we've got 4 more minutes. Any last minute questions? All right, I do not see anything. So Franklin, just one question for me. If you had to pick one certification that could get you to where you're at, just one.
Oh man.
What would you say it would be?
Boy, that's tough. There's so many pieces. I think I would go for something a little more future-proof, forward-looking. The biggest, hardest one out there, maybe. I'm not sure how to answer, because I'm thinking like OSCP might be good, but that's red team. But then you've got containers. You've got the networking piece. I guess let's keep it simple. Focus on the basics and go for something networking related. So Network Plus, CCNA, learn those lessons, and the whole time you do it, keep security in the back of your mind, because you're going to hear these folks as they start to tell you, oh man, just don't worry about it. We'll just, open the lab up and anyone can log in, because that little voice in the back of your head, that's when stuff, right, goes off the rails, gets unsecured. Don't take shortcuts in security, right? Try to be precise, use encryption, use all the security pieces that people don't turn on because it's too hard. Like, flip it on its head. And the reason is you can't make a mistake, right? The bad guys can be wrong for months. They just sit on your stuff until they find a mistake or a misconfiguration or something simple, and then that's their way in, that's their pivot. So I think networking with a security mindset.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Franklin. We appreciate you coming out and speaking with us today. So you guys can check him out on, I think he gave you his GitHub, so check that out. And you can follow him online as well. So I appreciate your time, and thank you as always for your insight.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, great. Have a good night, everyone. Take care.